It wasn't the bison that scared them, or the lions. Archaeologists had seen thousands of Ice Age animals painted on cave walls before, but this was different. Deep in a frozen cavern lit only by the shaky glow of a headlamp, they found a human figure, sprawled flat, limbs splayed, body punctured by multiple spears. Beside it, a strange symbol, carved and painted over and over again in caves miles apart, as if announcing something only the living back then would understand. Was it a warning, a threat, a signature left by killers? For decades, we told ourselves Ice Age people lived simple, peaceful lives, their art a celebration of the hunt. But what if we've been wrong? What if these walls are hiding the oldest crime scenes in human history? Executions, ambushes, even ritual killings, recorded in pigment that has outlived entire civilizations. And what if those strange half-human, half-animal figures weren't just art, but part of something darker? These caves hold stories we were never meant to hear, until now. Step inside, and you might not look at our ancestors the same way again. Long before the first city rose from brick, before the first sword was forged, someone in the deep past knelt in darkness and left a mark on stone. Not for food, not for shelter, but for memory. In the southern tip of Africa, in a place called Blombos Cave, archaeologists uncovered artifacts that feel almost impossible in their age. Over 70,000 years old, blocks of ochre etched with deliberate crosshatch patterns, strings of shell beads worn soft from years of skin contact, bone tools stained red from pigment, and abalone shells still holding traces of crushed ochre like prehistoric paint jars. These were not the tools of survival, they were the tools of meaning. But then came the discovery that shattered the old story. Homo sapiens weren't the only ones doing this. In Spanish caves like La Pasiega and Maltravieso, faded red lines and shapes have been dated to 64,000 years ago, 20,000 years before our species ever reached Europe. The artists? Neanderthals. Far from the brutish stereotype, they too carried that same spark, a need to leave marks that would outlast them. That spark spread like fire. In Sulawesi, Indonesia, 45,000 years ago, someone painted wild pigs so vivid you can see the tension in their necks. In Borneo, massive cattle loom over the rock, frozen mid-step. Across Australia's Kimberley region, delicate silhouettes of kangaroos, fish, and mysterious human forms stretch back 40,000 years. But when Ice Age art reached its peak in Europe, something strange happened. The walls filled with breathtaking animals, but almost no humans. In Chauvet, lions stalk reindeer in scenes so lifelike you can see their muscles coil before the pounce. In Lascaux, herds of spotted horses thunder across stone, their patterns so accurate modern DNA confirms they existed exactly as painted. Yet humans, the artists, themselves are absent, and when they do appear, it is rarely as hunters or heroes. Instead, they are dying, abstracted, twisted. Figures lie pierced by spears, limbs outstretched in agony, or vanish into the bodies of beasts. Why would people who could paint with such skill avoid showing themselves, unless showing humans was dangerous taboo, or meant only for the condemned? Imagine their world. 37,000 years ago, fewer than 4,000 Homo sapiens roamed all of Europe, the population of a single small town scattered across a frozen continent. They lived in groups of 15 to 30, half of them children, bound together by fragile trust. There were no armies, no mass wars, but there were betrayals, jealousies, revenge, and when someone crossed the line, their punishment could be final. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherers find most killings are not over resources, but over personal grudges, breaches of taboo, or threats to status. They are planned, remembered, and retold for years. Now imagine such a death painted deep in a cave, preserved not for beauty, but as a warning. In Peshmeral Cave, amid the famous spotted horses, lies a human figure with arms and legs wide, body pierced by multiple spear-like shapes. Beside it, a strange symbol appears, the same mark seen in other caves miles away, perhaps a clan emblem or the ancient equivalent of a kill signature. And then there are the visions that feel like dreams you can't shake. The shaft scene of Lascaux, where a bison's intestines spill out beside a human figure with a bird's head, a bird-topped staff standing nearby like a totem of another world. Was it a failed hunt? A shaman's vision? A myth everyone once knew, but no one can tell now. In Gabaloo Cave, a bison with human arms twists in apparent pain, caught between man and beast. The hunter becoming the hunted. These images blur the line between memory and myth, between recorded violence and imagined power. And through all of them runs the same truth. Someone tens of thousands of years ago thought it was worth carrying pigment into the black heart of the earth, lighting a fire and painting something they needed the future to see. For decades, the popular image of Ice Age cave art was comforting. Majestic herds of reindeer, wild bison, thundering horses, predators frozen mid-pounce, all bathed in the warm nostalgia of a world where humans lived in balance with nature, honoring the animals that sustain them. But the deeper archaeologists pushed into certain caves, the more that illusion fractured, replaced by something colder, more unsettling. In some chambers among the elegant animals, human shapes began to appear, small, almost hidden, as if the artists wanted them noticed only by those who looked closely. And those humans were never alive and well. They were sprawled, twisted, pierced by weapons. The first shock for many came at Pech Merle Cave in southern France. There, beyond the famous spotted horses, lies a crude but haunting figure, a human body stretched wide, limbs out like a pinned insect, the torso and legs intersected by dark spear-like lines, 5, 6, perhaps 10, depending on how you count the faded pigment. The figure lacks the grace of the animals nearby, but the roughness makes it feel raw, urgent, as though the artist wasn't aiming for beauty, but for impact. Beside it sits a broad, symmetrical sign, sometimes interpreted as a bird, sometimes as an abstract geometric motif. Whatever it was, it appears again in other caves miles away, always in proximity to scenes of human injury. Was this a clan emblem, a mark of a violent group, or an ancient equivalent of a warning sign? This is what happens if you cross us. The pattern repeats at Cognac Cave, where the violence becomes even more explicit. On one panel, a human form is enclosed within the outline of a giant deer, likely a megaloceros, 3 long projectiles protruding from his back. Another figure, drawn in clearer lines, lies with arms and legs outstretched, pierced again and again, not just through the torso, but through joints and limbs. The placement is too deliberate to be random. These are kill points, disabling a body before delivering the fatal strike. Modern hunter-gatherer studies suggest such killings within a group follow strict, culturally accepted reasons: betrayal, theft, breaking of sacred taboos. In such small, tightly knit bands, violence was never casual. It was a last resort, and when it happened, it mattered enough to be remembered, perhaps even immortalized in pigment, in the deepest parts of the cave where only firelight could find it. But not all Ice Age violence was human against human. Sometimes the enemy had horns and a will to survive. In the shaft scene of Lascaux, one of the most mysterious panels in all Paleolithic art, a massive bison dominates the wall, its stomach ripped open, intestines rendered with an anatomical detail that is almost clinical. In front of it, a human figure lies flat on his back, arms flung wide, legs stiff, his head shaped like a bird's. Perhaps a mask, perhaps a transformation, perhaps an element of a now-lost myth. Next to him stands a tall staff topped with a bird figure, and what appears to be a spear juts from the bison's belly. The scene feels like a narrative. The spear wounds the bison, but not enough to kill it instantly, giving it time to gore the hunter in return. Yet the surreal details, the bird head, the staff, suggest more than a simple hunt. Could it be a shamanic vision, a symbolic tale of life, death, and transformation told through animal and human forms? We cannot know, but the strangeness is deliberate. At another site, Roc de Serre, the story is carved in stone rather than painted. A human figure appears to recoil from a charging bison or aurochs, the animal's body low and tense, head forward in attack. The man's pose is almost comical in its awkwardness, crouched with arms raised, but in the tension of the scene, you can feel the moment before impact, a reminder that in the Ice Age, the hunter could misjudge and the hunted could kill. Then, in Gabelow Cave, the boundary between man and beast dissolves entirely. A bison-bodied creature stands on human-like legs, its torso twisting as though in pain, lines incised into the stone suggesting wounds. The head is either horned or masked, and the overall form hints at a shaman, someone embodying the spirit of the animal during a ritual. Or perhaps a symbolic fusion of predator and prey, an acknowledgement of the dangerous balance between the two. Fascinatingly, indigenous peoples of the North American plains, separated by tens of thousands of years and half a planet, wore bison costumes during ceremonial hunts, not to deceive the animals, but to honor and connect with them spiritually. The similarity raises unsettling questions. Are certain ideas so deeply wired into human culture that they emerge independently, time and again? In all these violent or hybrid scenes, the setting matters as much as the image. These are not at cave entrances where daylight filters in. They are deep in the inner chambers, where reaching them requires crawling through narrow passages, navigating treacherous drops, carrying not just pigment, but also fire, food, and the will to finish the work in complete darkness. In those chambers, the flicker of torchlight would animate the walls, a wounded human jerking in the shifting light, a bison's charge seeming to advance and retreat with the shadows. This was not casual decoration. This was performance, ritual, initiation, warning, an experience meant to leave an imprint on the mind as much as on the stone. And the decision to place such scenes in these deep, secret spaces tells us something else. They were meant for a specific audience, not for everyone. Perhaps for the young hunters about to join the group. Perhaps for outsiders who had been captured and brought inside. Perhaps for members of the same clan who needed to remember a betrayal. Whatever the case, the act of painting violence was intentional, costly, and symbolic, and it endured. For tens of thousands of years, these silent panels have waited under layers of limestone and darkness. When the first modern explorers' lights swept across them, the shock was immediate, not because of the age, but because of the clarity of intent. These are not random marks. They are not accidents of pigment. They are moments, some real, some imagined, all important enough for someone to drag fire into the bowels of the earth, press their hands to cold stone, and make sure the story would never be forgotten. Even now, in the clean light of archaeology, the questions remain sharp. Were these warnings, histories, myths? Were they about what happened, or about what must never happen again? And most haunting of all, how many more of these violent walls still lie hidden in the dark, waiting for us to find them? The further we follow the thread of Ice Age art, the more the lines blur between history and myth, between what was painted to record and what was painted to warn, summon, or bind. If you stand in the deepest chamber of Chauvet Cave, surrounded by lions frozen mid-prowl and rhinos locked in a thunderous charge, it's easy to feel the room pressing in on you, not because of the stone, but because of the stories embedded in it. These walls were not made to be seen in the casual light of day. They were made to be encountered in the feverish flicker of fire, when every drawn limb and muzzle twitched in shadow, when every spear painted into a human body seemed to pierce and twist in motion. It was theater and ritual fused into one, and violence was often its centerpiece. Anthropologists have long argued that art emerged simply to honor the hunt or to practice its skills. But here, violence appears coded, ritualized, and aimed inward at the human heart. Scenes of death are not chaotic. They are patterned, echoing the same wounds, ribs, spine, neck, as though following an ancient rulebook of where to strike. And when you look at the recurring symbols, ladders of lines, chevrons, cross-hatchings, you realize they are not decorations. They are language before writing, a lexicon of shapes that could be clan emblems, kill markers, or sacred seals. Many appear in caves hundreds of miles apart, suggesting that Ice Age Europe, far from being a patchwork of isolated bands, was a continent stitched together by shared stories and symbols. Yet the content of some of those stories is darker than we ever imagined. Consider the hybrid figures, half human, half animal, that haunt caves like Trois Frères. There, in the flickering dark, a figure with the body of a man, the antlers of a stag, the ears of a predator, and the haunting stare of something not quite either crouches mid-step. Was this a god, a spirit, a shaman in trance? Or was it a memory of a person who wore such a guise during an act that demanded to be remembered? A killing, a sacrifice, a transformation of the victim into something other. In many hunter-gatherer societies, masks are not costumes. They are the being itself, worn not to impersonate, but to become. If the man in the antlers killed, it was the antlered spirit killing through him. And if he spared, it was the spirit that showed mercy. Could it be a counting system, a tally of kills, or a coded message about who has and has not passed through the trials of the group? If violence was ritualized, it could also have been a rite of passage. And rites leave marks, not just on bodies, but on stone. Imagine being a young hunter, led into the pitch-black tunnel by elders whose faces you cannot see, hearing the crackle of the torches, the low chanting echoing off the limestone. You are brought before a wall where the painted figure of a man lies pierced. Again and again, the red pigment still vivid. You are told, or perhaps you are not told, only shown, that this is what happens to the unworthy, the oath breakers, the ones who bring shame or danger to the band. Or maybe the figure is not a warning, but a mirror, meant for you to stand before it as the elders paint red lines on your own body, symbolically striking you down before raising you again as a full member of the group. This is not guesswork pulled from fantasy. This is anthropology's uncomfortable truth that violence, especially ritual violence, has always been as much a part of binding communities as love, trade, and shared meals. In a world where every winter could kill you and every wound could fester into death, the group's survival depended on trust so absolute it could not be left to chance. And the cost of betrayal was not exile, it was the spear. Yet if the caves are crime scenes, they are also cathedrals. Violence here is not celebrated for its own sake. It is framed, staged, often surrounded by symbols of life, flowing herds, fertile animals, the handprints of the living. This juxtaposition is the heartbeat of the Ice Age mind, that death and life are not opposites but partners, that killing and creation are both necessary, that the spear and the painted line are tools of equal weight. Modern eyes want to separate art from blood, but in the torchlight of those chambers, there was no separation. The act of painting violence may have been as sacred as the act of hunting or burying the dead. And perhaps this is the final twist in the story, that the oldest art we have, the first messages our species carved into the world, are not just about beauty or survival or even memory. They are about power. Power over animals, power over each other, power over the stories we tell about both. When we stand in those caves today, the air still damp and cold as it was 20,000 years ago. Our lights catch the same lines that flickered in the eyes of the people who made them. The pigments, mixed from minerals and spit, are still there. The spear marks are still there. The hybrid faces still crouch in the shadows. And we realize, with a shiver, that no academic theory can quite explain that the people who left these marks were not so different from us. We still tell stories of heroes and traitors, of hunts and ambushes, of death and transformation. We still mark our walls with the symbols of those stories, only now the walls are concrete and glass. The caves have not changed. We have, or perhaps we haven't.